Jackson, Mr. Golson, Dr. Joyner, Mr. Conway, Mayor.
Madam President, I'll show the screen if you want to share it.
Ok. Si están escuchando y necesitan traducción en español, por favor presionen el enlace que está en la parte baja de la pantalla que dice interpretación. Gracias. And so I think everyone's on now. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Mr. Conway, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I will. Please stand.
Oh, I don't know what happened there.
I pledge allegiance
To
the
the
flag
and
of the
to
United States of America
and
and
to the republic
Republic
for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one nation,
one
One
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
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 indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with liberty and
and
justice
justice for all.
for all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. First item is the approval of board meeting minutes dated February 22nd. Do I hear a motion to approve? Mr. Wilcox,
I move we approve the minutes.
Dr. Joyner,
Second,
any discussion? Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. Just very quickly, board minutes are supposed to be written so that folks can understand what actually happened at the meeting. We're getting better and better at this without going overboard. I think there's still some information that may be missing in this report. For instance, I would, for instance, on page, actually, there's no page numbers on here. So I guess it's 1, 2, page 3, where the top of the page says students reports.
Mhm.
Down on section I, VI, and then I. Is that an L or an I? That's the I, right? Yeah, it's an I. A
That's
personnel report. It says on the motion by Mr. Golson, seconded by Mr. Conway to table the first item on the personnel report. I don't know what that means. I mean, I was at this meeting 2 weeks ago and I forgot exactly what we tabled. So if there could be some description, if they don't want to give the name of the item that was tabled, at least give the position,
Okay.
so that we know what we did, because I can't remember exactly what we did there. And if I can't remember, then people that didn't attend the meeting are not going to be able to understand what that meant. So I would hope that we would correct these minutes to add the name, at least the name of the position. That's my first item. On that same page, under answer 2, second paragraph down, starts with Dr. Jackson. The second sentence starts with Mr. Golson asks that the executive team will bring decisions to the board prior to submitting. That is not what I asked for. I asked if the board was going to have to approve this item, this application. And we got an answer first from the superintendent that we didn't, and then we got an answer from the legal counsel, or maybe it was the CFO, I don't remember, that said we did because it was a grant application. So I would like for that section to be clear. Let me see, is that it? And that is it for me, Madam President.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Golson. Mr.
Oh,
Conway?
no, I'm sorry. No, yes, that's it for me. I did have a question. There's something that flew by me at that meeting that I kind of partially heard it. I would have asked the question if I had really been paying attention. Back on this last page, third item, it talks about citywide school building stewardship report. This is not really an agenda item, but I just want to put it out there so someone can give the answers for this eventually. Says Martinez's dehumidification system is not working. I would have asked the question if I had paid attention to this. And how old is Martinez? I don't need to get an answer right now, but I hope that I could get an answer eventually, because this just kind of it's the same question that people have been raising lately about the life of these buildings and the buildings not having as long a life as they could be because of lack of maintenance. So, and I thought Martinez was one of our newer schools, so I'd like to get an idea of how old that is. But that is not an issue that will be addressed by the minutes, but I just didn't want to forget. I didn't want to forget it, so I wanted to put it on the record. Thanks, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Mr. Conway?
Could I just request that the minutes, could we get page numbers on them, like page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? That would just be helpful when we're, referring to the middle of page 3 or the bottom of page 4. If we could get page numbers on that, I would appreciate that.
Yep, that makes sense. Any further discussion? Okay, so we'll vote on accepting the minutes as with the corrections. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Dr. Jackson,
Yes.
Mr. Conway,
Yes.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
is Mr. Fiore on? No. Ms. Aruna?
Yes.
And I am a yes, and so the minutes pass with corrections. Next item is public participation.
Dr. Joyner, are you ready to keep time?
I am, but we need to have people give their names rather than an organization so that we can get back to them if necessary.
Yes. At this time, if anyone wishes to address the board for public comment, please use the raise hand function. When you are called on, please state your name for the record. Thank you. Our first speaker is Leslie Blateau. Ms. Blateau, you may speak.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Leslie Blateau. I'm a teacher at Metropolitan and a parent at Hill Central. First, thank you to the NHPS staff and community partners who are supporting and coordinating the vaccination effort. I also want to recognize the amazing work of New Haven's elementary school teachers and support staff, building community in their in-person classrooms while also supporting the growth of students at home is a Herculean task. They should have gotten their raises this year. As for high school, some students are excited to return. Some know they will stay remote, while others are undecided as they wait for updates about how many students will be on buses, how lunch waves will work, how contact tracing will work with more complicated school schedules, and other relevant details. Families need to learn this information so they can make informed choices. I also hope the state and local health departments will pay close attention to the variants that are spreading much more easily around the world. Regions in Italy have recently closed all of their schools, even young children's classrooms, for the first time this school year. We are not out of the woods yet. Lastly, I ask the board to pay close attention to the work of the youth leaders at the Citywide Youth Coalition, U.S. Senator Murphy, and the National Black Lives Matter at School movement. They share a common vision when it comes to the issue of safe schools. They agree that safe schools are police-free schools. Youth voices matter, and when we hear young people speak unequivocally about their desire for transformative justice, we should ask, why is there such an urge to maintain the status quo and continue to have armed police officers in our schools? Who's afraid of whom? Whom and what are we protecting with police? Why are we sending a message laden with low expectations, violence, and punishment to young people in our community's most important buildings? If New Haven Public Schools believes in restorative and transformative justice, breaking the school to prison pipeline, addressing systemic racism in our community, and prioritizing the safety of all of our students, then the board will take the necessary next steps to remove armed police officers from our school buildings. Thank you. 2 minutes, I rehearsed. Appreciate you
Good
all.
job.
I'm going to assume, because I have the unmute button, that Dr. White says that citywide parent team is next, because he went muted. I still can't hear you. Are we next?
Yes, you are the next speaker.
Okay.
I apologize. I was muted at that moment when I announced you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Najija Ife Waters. I am the citywide parent team president. It's been about a week now that I sent out a letter to the board members asking for an investigation of the superintendent. And I have not heard from either one of you. So just to put it out there, FYI, section 10.4B, complaint alleging failure or inability of the Board of Education to implement educational interests of state, investigation, inquiry, hearing, remedial process, and regulations. I'll let you guys go ahead and look up that section. My next move, if I don't hear from anyone from the board as of today, I am going to reach out to all of the organization around me, and I'm going to share with them exactly what that particular section says to join forces with me to get the state involved, because the board, the local board, has failed us and will continue to fail us. You guys are operating out of 14 years outdated policies. You have 8 years outdated charter policy. This is no longer acceptable. We're going to have to do something. You guys spend more time bickering with one another, doing unnecessary investigation instead of making sure that we're up to par with our policies so that we can make sure that everyone is governed accordingly. Again, please take a look at section 10.4B. I will be following a state complaint, and I will be looking forward to having other organizations to stand with me to show the incompetence of this board. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jill Kelly. Dr. Kelly, you may begin.
Hello. I just wanted to share a few numbers with you as you prepare to make decisions about opening the high schools in a few weeks. Just numbers about statistics from COVID in schools in Connecticut that I think you may not be aware of. So far this school year, there have been 6,160 cases in school staff in Connecticut. Over 16,000 cases in students, 5,000 of those are identified as remote. Since state reporting began, there have been 630 cases where a single school reported 6 or more COVID cases in 1 week, and 13 instances where a single school reported 20 or more cases. The highest case counts were in high schools with hybrid attendance models. And I just want to read you a few of those. We've had to estimate, because of the less than 6 anonymity in the school data, we've had to estimate a range of cases. So New Britain High School this school year has had between 189 and 221 cases total. Norwich Free Academy, between 147 and 187. Brian McMahon High School, 131 to 147. Norwalk High School, 126 to 158. New Canaan High School, 111 to 139. Danbury High School, 104 to 148. These are all the schools with the highest numbers of cumulative cases in the state. And the thing I want to draw your attention to is they're all high schools. If you look at the top 50, they're all high schools with 1 or 2 middle schools thrown in. So I would like you to consider that as you consider reopening the high schools. Thanks a lot.
Our next speaker is listed as Kirsten. Please state your full name when you come on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, this is Kirsten Hopes McFadden. I am both a teacher and parent at ESOMS, and I'm also an advocate. And I'm here to say that we need better contact tracing in New Haven. There have been many letters from different staff members that have been sent to us. And I'm amazed that the board is not CC'd on those letters and that our unions are not CC'd on those letters. This just past week, 7 or 8 letters have gone out, at a minimum, have gone out. And those are the ones that we know about. And it was over 150, maybe close to 200 people that were placed on quarantine. And we asked for some information to be placed on the agenda. It was not placed, and it just may have not been timely. I'm not sure what the reason why it wasn't placed. But we need contact tracing. Contact tracing that includes the buses, that includes, now that you have middle school in here, and all the middle schools are not staying in the same classroom. They can't. They have to move amongst the building. And we need informed decisions from the district. And there's the dashboard is not updated like it's supposed to be. We don't know if parents are going to send their children in, they need to be able to make an informed decision. We don't even know who's doing the contact tracing. Dr. Bond was out for like 2 weeks according to her email. You have the director of nursing is leaving. We're short 10 nurses. We're told that we'll send over somebody from the temp agency. Every district in the state is using the same temp agencies. We don't know who is doing the contact tracing. And that is something that's very important. We're at the point where we can end this, we can kind of see the end of this pandemic. And yet we're going to go way backwards if we don't get a handle on this. And people don't know what decisions, how to make an informed decision.
Time.
Thank you very much.
Finish your sentence, please, if you'd like.
You don't make a informed decision. Thank you very much. Hope that you consider what I asked for. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Madam President, that concludes the list of the people that have raised their hand to speak.
Thank you, Dr. White. We'll move on to the students' report.
Good evening, everyone. So I do not have an official student report for today's meeting, but just from the reaction from most high schoolers in the district, a lot of people are ready and excited to come back. Of course, there are a lot of questions and a lot of, little issues that I think we will address as time goes on. So that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Aruna.
Thank you.
Dr. Tracy, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me see if thank you, Madam President, and good evening, board and members of the community who are listening. This is Board Appreciation Month, and I sent something out to all board members today to say that personally, I appreciate the service of all board members. Anything that is being done on behalf of the community, school community, and community at large, taking time out of your busy schedules. Many of you work, and to take time out of your busy schedules to do this work is significant to me. So thank you for the work that you have done and will continue to do on behalf of the school system and the community. Madam President, I ask that the report, the personal report, be accepted, be approved.
Dr. Joyner?
So moved.
Is there a second? Mr. Wilcox?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the personnel report. Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Jackson. Dr. Jackson,
Yes.
thank you. Mr. Conway,
Yes. Yes.
thank you. Ms. Aruna,
Yes.
and I am a yes. And so the personnel report is accepted. Please continue, Dr. Tracy.
Thank you so much. I now turn to the agenda item of update on governor's proposed budget and potential impact on NHPS. As you know, the legislative session is going on, and we've had conversation with our legislators around SO2 and other things. Mr. Penn is going to be testifying on behalf of New Haven Public Schools regarding the governor's proposed budget and the impact it would have on New Haven Public School. Other members of the community have already written testimonies that went off to the state. Mr. Phil Penn, will you please kindly share the impact with the board that will have on New Haven Public Schools?
Sure. Although I think you stole a little bit of my thunder there. The issue is that the ECS/Alliance grant is by far our biggest grant supporting the schools at just over $160 million. It literally makes up 80% of our general fund funding in a given year. And what's been proposed by the governor, for those that haven't heard about this yet, is a freeze on ECS and Alliance increases for the next 2 years. And what's particularly troubling about that is there was an agreement made just 2 years ago that would have increased funding for the neediest districts over the next 10 years. So the impact of this on New Haven in the immediate term is almost $9 million. But my bigger concern is that if it's frozen once, it might be frozen for good. And the particular thing that's galling about it is in his budget presentation, the governor put in ESSER 2 funding almost as if it's a consolation prize for the freezing on the ECS Alliance funds. And as I've said to this board, and as I plan on saying tomorrow to the Appropriations Committee, and was submitted in a written commentary today, those two are not equivalent. There's a long-held policy around federal grants that you cannot supplant what is in your existing budget using federal funds for educational needs. You can only supplement. And it violates the spirit of that grant too, when you think about it, that it's all about academic recovery and targeted about the most needy populations that we have. That's very clearly laid out in the grant narratives that were sent to us. And so to think that you can take those funds and simply cover your general fund budget really violates not only the spirit, but the letter of the law when it comes to those grants. That's basically what the legislator will be hearing tomorrow when I get an opportunity to speak at the public hearing. Anyone who's interested in supporting that view, there is a way to go to the Appropriations Committee on the General Assembly's website and submit written commentary. I've been told many times from testifying that they actually do read all the written commentary that gets submitted. And then the live public hearing starts at, I believe, at 5 p.m. tomorrow. And sometime around 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'll find out where in the stacking order I'll be testifying. The last time I did this, it went until almost 2 a.m. So it can be a very, very long night with the Appropriations Committee. So we'll see. So, but that's the basic update. And, you know, I think the conversations that we've had with the delegation so far, they're aware of how serious an issue this is. And we're planning on reaching out to the other Alliance districts to make sure they had a unified front in terms of opposing what's been proposed by the governor this way. And then the last thing is, you know, as far as the ESSER 2 money goes, Ms. Hannons has been doing a great job in terms of shepherding that along. We're hopeful that we'll be bringing to the Finance Committee and eventually the full board the abstracts for that grant, hopefully in the April timeframe. That's sort of the timetable that we're operating on right now, which will then give us the opportunity to spend in advance of what would be a very robust summer in terms of academic acceleration. So Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Phil. And there are 31 alliance districts across Connecticut. All 31 superintendents plus others have signed off on a major statement to the governor regarding the inequities that this will set up and the devastation this will have on primarily alliance districts. So myself included and other superintendents have signed off on this statement that has already gone to the state regarding this grant funding. If you will wait, if you want to ask questions about that, or you want to wait till the other presentation. Board
Yeah,
members,
let's just, if we can
want me
hold
to
our
just finish and
questions.
then you can have your
Yeah.
questions formulated.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, the next item is update from Go-To Services regarding air filters. I want to acknowledge the frustration that may be out there around air filters. I want to also say that there are a lot of information coming from the New Haven Independent with varied comments about the condition or maintenance of New Haven public schools. No one knows of the timeline of those things. However, as a leader of the district, I'm going to say whatever happens in the district, whether we are a Comer district that operates on 3 guiding principles: no fault, consensus, collaboration. So I'm not here to fault anyone. I'm here to say that I, as a leader of the district, of the New Haven Public Schools CEO, whatever happens, good, bad, or indifferent, I'll take the blame for it as we move forward. But I'd like to have either Phil or Pepe say something around the filter issues. Phil, is Pepe on here?
He is in the list of attendees.
is.
Dr. White, can you get him moved up to a panelist?
Okay, good evening, Madam President and board members. Can you all hear me now? Am I
Yes, we can hear
okay? For the record, Joseph Barbarata, Executive Director Facilities for Go-To Services. And if I may I share my screen, Madam President?
Please.
Hi, Dr. White, I don't know if you're okay. No, I'm good, I think here. 1 second. Hold on. I had it already, now I can't find it again. Well, hold on 1 second, I gotta load it back up. Okay, now we can be able to see.
Before that, Madam President, Matt has his hands raised.
Mr. Wilcox?
The hand raised, Matt?
No?
Oh, I saw a hand up there. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, can we see that now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to start by giving you just a little background of the filter issues and what we're talking about tonight. Just to put it in context, we're talking about 4.2 million square feet of space. We're talking about 46 buildings, and give you some history around the filter changes. So there used to be a position in the custodial local 287 union called a custodial engineer, and the function of that position was to change filters, lubricate motors, work on equipment. That position was eliminated, and those job functions were put in when we did the arbitration award. Those job functions were rolled into the custodial, and we changed their title from custodians to building managers, because they were taking on other responsibilities like changing filters, changing light bulbs, replacing seal tile. All those things were rolled into their job function. Some other history I think you need to know is that we used to have a warehouse at 654 Ferry Street. We also had a warehouse at 80 Hamilton Street. And at 80 Hamilton Street, we had backup storage for filters. So we always had a backup supply. Today, we have to order filters and get them drop shipped to the school as we don't have any place to inventory those. So over the years, we've had the arbitration award change that building manager's position and the title, and they've done a very good job. You know, I'm not direct anything toward the building manager. They over the years have helped change the filters, and that's one of the things I'm hope to show here in this slideshow is that there's a perception that we haven't changed filters in 4 or 5 years, which just is not true. You'll see that we could show that we do the filter changes in a staggered schedule, depending on the date and not only the date that they were put in, but also on the status pressure that they put in the system. So I have a letter from the contractor that will explain that. But again, just to show some of the deferred maintenance, we lost the positions. We rolled the position into the building managers. They've done a fine job accepting those responsibilities. And then we had a third-party independent company come in about 10 years ago, and they did an evaluation of the schools. And they determined that we needed $41 million a year. Here's a copy of one of the pages out of their report. And basically what they said is in order to maintain everything that you need to get everything fixed throughout the district, and this again is 10 years old, so I promise you this number is increased from what you see here, that we needed a $41 million annual investment to keep up with all the buildings and to maintain everything that needs to be done. So the budget back then, when we were changing filters 2 or 3 times a year back then, you'll see why, that we were using different filters, and that's what they required. So we had a budget of $100,000. That's been reduced to $50,000. We worked with our contractor to find out how we could manage with that budget, and we came up with a new filter that was on the market. It was a MERV 8, and the MERV 8 was a godsend to us because it only had to be changed once a year. It could actually go up to almost 2 years if we decided to do that. We did not. We changed it annually, and that filter it was the highest available filter on the market, and it was not nearly expensive as anything else was out there. So we had introduced the MERV 8s into the whole New Haven system. There's 6,244 filters throughout the district. We have a breakdown by school if we needed to see that. But again, this is how the filter program evolved over the years. We were back, as I said, we would change the original filters were low quality, and they were needed to be changed 2 or 3 times a year, and we had that program. Then we upgraded to the MERV 8, and we were by this time last year, I'll show you a report here that shows that we had changed all the filters in the district to MERV 8. So we had just got done upgrading our annual filters last year when the COVID hit. And by the way, today's the date. The first report last year, March 8, was the first known COVID case in the state. So at that time, we were making a COVID site at Career High School, and again, we had just finished changing all those filters, and now the recommendation that came out from the CDC was to upgrade everything to MERV 13s. So there's a cost involved with that. The MERV 13s are, they catch a lot finer particles than the MERV 8, so an abundance of caution. The board wanted those put in all the schools. So there was, we started ordering those, and us and the rest of the world were all ordering them at the same time. Those unfortunately have to be changed twice a year. So our budget now has to go from $50,000 a year to $225,000 a year, and that's just to get the filters. We still have to install them. We've always had a hybrid team putting in the filters. We've had the custodians, most of the custodians are very good at changing their filters as we order them and get them shipped to the school. There are some custodians that aren't physically capable or can't do it, so we do some of this on overtime with a custodial overtime team that does some of this, and we did some of this with the contractor. So that's always been the way it's done. It's been done on a schedule, a staggered schedule, and we did as much as we can in-house. I just wanted to, if I can, give me a minute here to scroll down. I wanted to show you this report, which is, let me see if it's a little bit bigger, if we can read it. But this is a list of the schools where we, for last year. So this is saying in the month, so in 2019, in month 10, we changed filters at Beecher School. And you can see again, they weren't changed till 2020, Beecher School. So you can see some things were done in the October, of 19. There's a total there. Then some things were done in July. We had some in June, some in July. And so, as I said, it's done in a staggered schedule based on when the last time they were done and on also pressure drop in the filters. Also want to show you this is a report from our Munis system, directly from Munis, showing that the funds that were spent by year, what was allocated, what was spent, and the companies, the duct cleaning was due in 16, 17, and they also had the contract 17, 18. In 18, 19, we had a small contractor that won the award for all of the HVAC stuff, including filter change, and they weren't qualified, and we ended up terminating that contract. So in that year, we did the distribute with our own custodial staff. It wasn't done through the contractor, the vendor. And then again in 1920, Filter Sales won the contract, and then the Filter Sales is doing it again this year. So I realized that the concern that we have is, yes, I got filters, but how do you know they were put in? And we missed evidently something at Little Hooker. So I can't really give you a report that verifies who put in the filters in the past years, but going forward and for this year, we got signatures from who put them in at each school. So that it would be our plan going forward, that as we go to the MERV 13s and change those going forward, that we get a sign off to verify that they're being installed. And the other thing, I just want to emphasize again that our custodial staff has been exemplary in this. This is a Herculean task. When we were tasked to do this last year, remember we had Fuss and O'Neill, and they had given a report on all kinds of issues in the school. So we were doing, our custodians were putting floor tape down. They were making sure the signage was right. They were putting ties on lockers. They were bagging the fountains and the toilets and the sinks. And our tradesmen were working. We have 12 tradesmen total. They were working on air conditioning things. We were putting making plexiglass, and we were making isolation rooms. So all these things were going on at the same time. We're changing MERV 13 filters now, and we had never in the past in 1 year said it's July, we're going to change all the filters. It's always been a staggered thing until this year. Now we did change them all, and now in another month and a half or 2 months, we're due to change them again. We've already ordered those weeks ago. We've actually received a couple at a couple of schools, so we're ready to start changing the second round of MERV 13s. But again, we're going to need to get an increase in our budget to be able to maintain this going forward. The other thing I wanted to show is that we have an indoor air quality program. So if we get an issue at a school, our our custodial staff will put it in the work order, and it will be highlighted, and it will go to Tom Falzone, who's our OSHA director. And Tom fills out this report. He goes out and he investigates what's there. He takes pictures, and then we follow up and get the things done. So that, I think that pretty much wraps up what I needed to say. I can answer any questions, but again, we've now at this point have MERV 13s in the schools. They're all signed off by the different custodial staff. And this is the plan going forward. I can answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Barbarotta. Mr. Conway?
Thank you for that report. So it sounds like that. We have over the years a position problem, a warehouse problem, funding problem, and we've been COVID exposed. And I know when I was working for the district, I know that there was a deep reduction in the custodial staff as well. And I'm with Dr. Tracy. I'm not trying to blame anybody, but these little basic things we have to get resolved. And I don't know if that means and by the way, that sign off sheet, I saw a lot of blank signatures on that second page too. So I don't know what that right there. I see a lot of blank. I don't know what that means. I can't read it.
Right.
So
that means I'm sorry, Mr. Conway, that means they're probably on the first page. Because we had two people going out trying to get the signatures as quickly as we could. I think in the future we'll give you one page with all the signatures on it, but that's the difference here.
Yeah, and like I said, I don't want to blame anything. I particularly don't want to blame, the custodians, and I also, I know the trade staff. I know that their staff has been reduced as well. I saw that when I was working. So again, I think we need to chip away at this thing, and if we have to bring positions back, if we have to get more funding, we've been COVID exposed, and these things just have to be resolved. And safety of the staff, safety of the teachers, safety of the students are our number one goals. So I just want to say that without blaming, anybody. So these are big items. $41 million over a 10-year period. That's a big number to me. So I just want to go on record saying that. We got to chip away. We have to chip away with this. We have to chip away at this situation a little bit at a time. And again, if it means that we have to bring positions back, if we have to get warehouses back, if we have to go after special funding, as a policymaker, those are the things that I see that needs to happen. And I'm sure the custodians and principals and stuff, they have a lot more to offer. When you're at that building level, you just see things a lot different. So thank you for that. Thank you for that report. But we got a lot of work to do and a long way to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Dr. Joyner?
First,
Mr. Barbarotta, were you going to respond to something that?
Yes, I'd like to respond to just one thing that Mr. Conway said. I don't believe that we had COVID exposure. As this chart shows, we had changed all our filters to MERV 8, which were the best available market on the time, and still to this day, CDC recommends between MERV 8 and 13s. We, as a board and a district, decided to, in abundance of caution, go to the 13s. But we had MERV 8s in place, and as of October last year. So it was the best available filter on the market at the time. So thank you.
Dr. Joyner?
First of all, let me say amen to everything that Mr. Conway said. I guess one of the advantages we both had is that we led buildings. And I'd also like to say amen to what Dr. Tracy said about trying to solve the problem without spend more energy solving the problem than pointing the blame. If in fact there was only one filter, then that means that 99.99999% of the schools in this district were in a good place with regard to that. Because one, is an infinitesimal, it's a very small part of 6,000 filters. I wanna just continue to talk about some things that Mr. Conaway said in terms of resources. You certainly can't do anything without personnel and services and equipment. And quite frankly, I spent most of the weekend researching what buildings are doing across the world to particularly in public spaces, commercial spaces, to keep people safe. And we actually have a worldwide problem with unhealthy buildings. And as much criticism as we've gotten in New Haven is really at the forefront of trying to make the changes in buildings despite difficult, the lack of fiscal support and the fact that we don't have all the personnel in place. We don't have a chief operating officer. We don't have the engineering support that we need. And we also have buildings based on the transition team report of 6 years ago that we don't have the budget to keep these buildings up. That's like buying a great car and not being able to keep up the maintenance. You know what happens when that happens. I think the other thing that I like to say that will piggyback on what Mr. Conaway said is that knowing a lot of these custodians personally, and knowing that many of them have children and grandchildren in the schools, I don't think anybody gets up in the morning with the idea that we're going to go in the buildings and make the buildings unsafe for children. I think that our custodians are dedicated, and I think that our central office staff and teachers and principals are dedicated people, and they want the best for themselves and others. What I'd like to do is try to convince the board to adopt a healthy building certification for all of our buildings, because that's the standard, and it's backed up by all the engineering organization, all the environmental services organization, and it actually ties directly into what the kids are asking for in terms of climate, not just the climate in the world, but of course the climate in the world, the climate in the buildings, the climate in the community, and so on and so forth. And so we are doing all those things. Here's where I think the healthy building certification will be helpful. One, it will set some very clear standards for what should be in our buildings. And if we don't get the funding for it, we can actually use, hopefully, those standards to agitate for the funding so that we can meet those standards. Secondly, I think that there's a lot of training necessary so that we can bring all our people up to speed. And I believe that we ought to ask the principal to take responsibility for making sure those things get done by working with his building operations teams through his school planning and management team, or her school and management team. We have a structure in place that can do that. I have a lot of information that I'd like to send out to the board for reading regarding healthy building certification. And then the other thing, Dr. Tracy, is the whole notion of being able to do real-time monitoring. If Mr. Conaway and I were back in buildings now as principals, we ought to be able to go to our computers and look at an operations software program that would tell us whether or not all of our mechanics, as well as our consumables and any of those things associated with the quality of air, water, not just air, and those things that contribute to safety and well-being of people, whether those things are up to stuff or whether they're not. We ought to be able to know that in real time. And I think that's critically important. And of course, we ought to be able to document it with videos and pictures. It would be great if I could see a picture of a person putting the filter in, a signature of the person that put that filter in, and if necessary, a video, because we're also dealing with a public relations problem. That all it takes is one minor thing that can be blown up, particularly if people don't know enough about the issue, and it can look like we're being irresponsible, and that's not the case. So I would like to ask that the board and Dr. Tracy try to create a cross-section of people that can move us towards safe, healthy building certification, And we can set standards for air quality, water quality, and various other things related to having buildings in such a way that they actually enhance performance. And that also includes climate in the building, the heat or cold of the building, and a number of things. And that's going to cost money. But we do need to let the public know that in order for us to keep our kids safe, in order to keep our staff safe, that we need to do this. We should not be sending people into buildings where we don't have these things in place. And by the way, when I looked at what's going on across the world, often schools are the most healthy buildings, but there are other facilities in the community that don't have inspections, like churches, restaurants, and so on and so forth. And we have no idea what kind of filters they're using. We have no idea about the HVAC system. And so if we're concerned about the well-being of everybody in the community, we ought to be concerned about spaces where human beings occupy and to make sure that those spaces meet the standards for healthy buildings. I think we need to get on it, as Mr. Conaway suggested, and I think we need to develop a plan that will put us in a strong position so that if something happens next fall with respect to COVID and what have you, that we'll be ready for it. In fact, that's what the experts recommend, that we have to constantly plan, and we have to plan for any kind of eventuality as far as the safety of buildings are concerned. Thank you.
Mr. Goldson and then Dr. Jackson.
Thank you, Madam President. First of all, I'm insulted that we got this report like this, that it wasn't emailed to us earlier. We've requested, or at least I've requested over and over again, that if we're going to have these kind of written reports, we should have them emailed to us so we can review them and be ready for them when they come. So I'm insulted by that. I'm also quite surprised by this conversation. We've had this discussion about healthy buildings over and over and over again, even before COVID. But since COVID, we've had it nearly every other month. We've been talking about this. You know, as a matter of fact, I think I sent out a memo a couple of weeks ago to the board president and the rest of the board, reminding them that we have a responsibility as a board outlined in state statutes to develop committees, school committees, to report on school climates, not the climate around attitudes and so on, but on physical facility climates. That's in the state statutes. And we're sitting here and acting like we never talked about this before. We never had this conversation. I'm shocked that Mr. Barbarato would actually suggest that the CDC that said MERV 8 filters were adequate for COVID, because they said they weren't. And we had this discussion, we had this debate, we read many reports. I've read several reports around this, and MERV 8s are not small enough to stop the virus from getting into the system. You had to have a MERV 13. We had this conversation with the superintendent, who kept insisting she was going to do MERV 8s until we insisted that you do MERV 13. So no, MERV 8s were never adequate. And this is not just about these filters, and they're not just about small problems that may crop up in one school. We had a young person, a 5 or 6 year old, wander off from one of our buildings and go 2 blocks in the middle of the hill because the gate wasn't repaired, that they had asked to be repaired several times, the teachers and so on, and the custodians. And this happens. I mean, you know, Mr. Wilcox could report several problems that we've had around those kind of issues. This is not new. And we found out during that process that there were several gates throughout the entire system that were not working. They went and got repaired. So this suggestion that all of this is new to us and it's just a one-off and it's just a small problem is not the case. It's just the problems that we have identified at this moment, and then they'll disappear off the radar screen, and then 6 months later something else will happen and a new problem will pop up that someone hasn't taken care of. Now, and this is not about hiring more supervisors to supervise folks to do it. Because let me tell you something, I agree, and I don't think anybody has said that it's a custodian's fault. It has never been the custodian's fault. They have been decimated. Their troops have been decimated. I was on the board of aldermen when there was a vote to destroy that union, to reduce them by, I don't know, like half of the numbers, 1/3 of the numbers. I voted against it because I didn't see the sense of hiring folks like to come and supervise the people that actually doing the work. Hire more workers if you want to get the work done. The supervisors are not going to make the work get done. It's the workers it's those overworked custodians who are going to get the job done. We hear over and over and over again, and Dr. Joyner can attest to this. He's been on the board long enough. We've heard over and over again about disappearing work orders. Disappearing, just disappear out of the system. Now that doesn't happen on their own. Somebody's deleting them. They're not getting done and they're being deleted. We shouldn't be sitting here saying it's a small problem. We should be asking who's going to be held accountable. Now, I heard, the superintendent saying, oh, we're not going to blame anybody. Somebody has to be held responsible, has to be held accountable for what's going on. And we could have predicted this 10 years ago when they decimated the custodians union. They tried to do it again a year and a half ago when they tried to take that union position and give it to GO2, and we fought that back. It was a close vote, but we fought that back. That's been happening over the years. And you take the workers offline and you give it to supervisors who are not actually doing the work, who are actually not going in and changing the filters or oiling the motors and so on. Martinez, I don't know the facts yet, but I know Martinez is too young a school to have all of this dehumidification systems out of order and having to be replaced for hundreds of thousands of dollars. We had to pay a $500,000 payment out to a teacher in one of our schools because we just spent $50 to make sure she had an adequate ramp and that she had access to an elevator. $500,000 when we could have spent $50,000, and no one was held accountable for that. And that continues to go over and over and over again. Well, I mean, this stuff just annoys me to no end, because then we sit here and with our hands over our eyes and over our ears and over our mouths and act like we never knew about it. We know about it, and I'm not going to allow people to sit here and act as though they didn't, because we did. And we need to start making people accountable for this, because you know what? People like me and the mayor and Dr. Joyner, we're held accountable because every 2 years, every 4 years, folks vote on us. So we have to go to those voters. But these other people that don't have to do that, they are not being held accountable for what they're doing or not doing or should have been doing. So to suggest that this is somehow some custodians overworked fault and they have to sign off on stuff now and all this other stuff, is nonsense. It's nonsense, and it's frustrating. And I'm just, I wasn't going to go here tonight, but when I started hearing about this no fault, and the custodians forgot it and all this other stuff, and that we don't have enough money. Sure, we never have enough money, but we should have enough money to make sure that kids are safe. We shouldn't sit up here and change history by saying our MERV 8s were adequate enough for COVID, when we all know that that's not the fact, and that's why we're doing MERV 13s now. We shouldn't sit up here and do that. It's a disservice to these taxpayers in this city. And I'd also like to say on another issue, I'm disturbed by the lack of support to Citywide, our parent organization that we fund, from the administration. I've seen some emails and text messages that's going back and forth between the leadership and the administration, and I'm disturbed by what I'm seeing. I know for a fact
Golden, please stick to the agenda.
That's on the agenda. That's part of the superintendent's report.
It's not what we're on at the moment.
Oh, we're not talking about.
We were talking about the filters. Please stick to the agenda. Thank you.
So okay. And so if you just want to talk about the filters, that's fine. I just, we need to start treating our folks, our staffers and our parents like they're full partners. Stop ignoring the problems. Stop throwing money in the wrong place to solve these problems, and get back to the old school way of making sure that folks on the ground are there to get the job done and they're held accountable when they don't. And having 3 layers of supervisors over a custodian is just not the way to do it. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Golson. Dr. Jackson?
I had a lot to say about the, about the filters, and I lost my train of thought. And I just would like to say that I've been sitting here tearful and upset because of something that was said. And I don't think if someone is bold enough to say something, then I'm going to be bold enough to explain why it was wrong and why I'm so upset. A leader on this Zoom used the phrase "off the reservation," and that is a slur. And I'm not going to accept that that person didn't know that it wasn't. Let me explain to you why. It's wrong because it conveys a 19th century impression of natives that they should stay on the reservation where they were put, that they're dangerous if they leave the reservation with their marauding and murderous ways, that the only way to turn them into peaceful Americans is to tame them. When you use that phrase "off the reservation," it means that Native Americans, that we're no good when we're off the reservation. So it's a negative connotation. Most Native Americans don't live on a reservation. So the person that said that, I wish that you would really, really educate yourself. I'm extremely upset that that was used by a leader of this district, that someone was off the reservation. I'm pissed. And now I have lost my thought about the filters. I wanted to talk about that, about asthma, because we know that our city has a lot of kids, but I'm just like, I'm sitting here weeping that someone would do that. Call me a nigger then. You might as well, because that's the same thing.
Dr. Joyner, are you going to say something?
Yeah, I do. I think, I think that that we have to be really careful. It was an insensitive statement. I'm not going to judge a person's intentions, but we're going to have to deal with that at the appropriate time. And we don't want to make anything bad worse. But I think we should. I think
it's bad. It's bad. You said something that was against someone's heritage. It's bad. And there's nothing to say that makes it any less bad. No one should comment about what I'm saying right now. It should be quiet now.
Madam Chair, I had the floor. It was an insensitive statement. And I was going to talk about this when we got to race and equity, but it was an insensitive statement. But I don't know if we should take a recess and try to get back to the business of the board, but it is something that has to be addressed.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Golson and then Mr. Conaway.
I've been investigated for less. So yeah, it's an issue that has to be addressed. I understand where Dr. Jackson is coming from. I'm part Native American myself. So, and it is just as bad as the words she said. It's frustrating to see certain people be able to get away with those kind of statements and be ignored, and other people be investigated for not making those kind of statements. So yes, I think there should be a follow-up to this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Conaway.
I'm just going to just say something that right now in this district, and it's probably starting from the top down, that we're dealing in a climate of distrust and just some very unhealthy behaviors. And I've said this at previous meetings. We just got to do better. I too agree that was an insensitive statement. And I'm with Dr. Joyner and Mr. Golson that has to be addressed. It's unfortunate. And again, I'm not judging or blaming or anything, but we just got to be careful. We're public officials. We got to get out of this climate of distrust in this district. It's this, you know, the parents, there's a lot of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. I will just say as board president, yes, we will talk about this privately and address it. I read the statement. I have had no idea what it meant. That doesn't excuse, you know, the statement that was made. I just, Dr. Jackson, want to apologize. I feel badly that you feel the way that you do. And of course, I'd like to talk to you about it tomorrow, and then also make sure that it gets addressed with that person. Thank you. Mr. Barbarata?
Yes, I just wanted to respond to one thing that Mr. Goldson said, that you know, the CDC recommendations have changed over time. They continue to change. Last year at this time, the MERV 8 wasn't acceptable. I agree, it became the requirement, but you know, they also at this time last year said that we had to bring in 30% air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when the schools were not occupied. Open the windows, bring in as much fresh air. Now they're telling us, you know what, you can't maintain the heat in the school when it's like opening your bedroom window during the night. So we now we're changing to going back to where we were. The CDC recommendation now is to only bring in the 30% air when the school is occupied, because we can't maintain the heat in the school and the buildings overnight with those cold temperatures. So, you know, CDC recommendations change over time. And that, by the way, is not like flipping a switch to change it from one to the other. It took a long time. It took a lot of man-hour stuff to bring everything to 24/7. Now to bring it all back to where we should have never left it from. And so that's all I wanted to say, is that CDC recommend change, and we're doing our best to keep up with those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wilcox?
I'll just add on this subject that this will be a discussion item on the next Finance and Operations meeting regarding the questions about filters. So if board members or others have questions or information that they would like us to be looking at, and then also to be able to distribute to the board and to the public, please let the committee know, and we'll add that to the list. And I also think that it would be a great idea if the presentation that was shared tonight was also emailed to the board and posted on the website as other meeting materials for this meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Penn?
Thank you. I'll make this brief. I believe in taking accountability for a person's actions, so I wanted to speak to that. Unfortunately, I think Dr. Jackson's dropped off the call at this point, but I wanted to apologize to her to offending her. I did send a private message to her doing that. I was unaware that term was offensive, but ignorance isn't an excuse. So I will admit to being ignorant about the fact that it was an offensive term. And I apologize to her and anybody else for using an offensive term. Clearly, I have learning to do when it comes to these kinds of things, and I'm not perfect, don't claim to be, but that's not an excuse either. So for anybody who I've offended tonight, I deeply apologize, and I'm willing to take whatever consequences come my way as a result of that. And that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you, Mr. Penn. Mr. Goldson, and then Dr. Joyner.
Madam President, I think Mr. Joyner had his hand up before I did.
Dr.
Mine is
Joyner.
short. Thank you, Mr. Goldson. Mine is short. Board members, if you want to get some really quick user-friendly information on MERV chart ratings, you can go to lakeair.com. That's LAKEARR.com. And you'll find that, quite frankly, both Mr. Golson and Mr. Barbarato were right, because there's been conflicting information coming from CDC around that. And I also think you get a good quick education on how too high a MERV can actually create a problem. So if you could just go to that website, you can do that. And it also has implications for your homes as well as other places where human beings inhabit. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. I at no time ever defended CDC's recommendations. And matter of fact, if everyone should know that I've continually said that I did not trust CDC under Donald Trump. They were changing their opinions all the time to meet his needs, not the public's needs. So when we had this debate about MERV 8 versus MERV 13, I specifically said during that debate that I did not trust the CDC, but I trusted all of those scientific studies that I read. I read about 4 or 5 of them, and they all said that MERV 8 was inadequate. So now maybe other folks wanted to depend on the CDC. I just thought that it was foolish to follow CDC's recommendations based on the changes that they were making, not just weekly, but almost within a day, changing their opinions based on what Donald Trump wanted to say. And I also like to respond to what our CFO said earlier. I was interrupted at one time, and I asked that person not to interrupt me again. And I thought that privilege, that there was a supposed privilege that allowed that to happen. And he apologized. And then several weeks later, I was hit with an investigation that included his complaint about me chastising him for interrupting me. So, these apologies happen, and then several days later, investigations happen. So I hope that that we find a way to begin to trust that folks believe what they say, so that we can believe what they say. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Dr. Tracy, does that conclude your report?
So with regard to MERV 13s, from even talking to some superintendents across the state, many of the buildings, the older buildings in particular, were not designed to have MERV 13s in them. They'll have more problem than what the 8s have. I'm just saying that's what was conveyed to me. So I'm not sure which of our buildings probably have problem with MERV 13s. I think the last time Pepe reported that some of the buildings in which MERV 13s were put, they're sucking in the filters. And I hope Pepe can elaborate on that. That's what I heard, because they were not designed that. Again, they're recommendations and not requirement, from my understanding at least, my limited understanding, I should say. Pepe, could you elaborate on that, where you see that the MERV 13s are being sucked in?
Yes. So the rooftop units and the air handler units have 2 filters in them. They have a pre-filter and they have a final filter. We have, in abundance of caution, replaced both of those filters with MERV 13s. We need our filter experts to actually. We're having an issue at Riverside. I wish I had the pictures, but Riverside, the static air, because that restricts so much air with the pre-filter and the final filter, it restricts the airflow in the unit, that it's sucking the final filter into the ductwork. So, I have to get them to do a report, and an expert, an engineer, they do this at filter change. They will monitor the static pressure, And I believe they will come back with a recommendation to put a MERV 8 in the pre-filter and a MERV 13 in the final filter. But I need a certified engineer to look at, I believe we have one other building, I'm not sure where it is, where we're having an issue now with the MERV 13s getting sucked into the system. So we're looking at that.
Mr.
That
Golson?
ends my
Oh, sorry.
report that ends my report, Madam President. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Tracy mentioned in her report that she signed off on a statement representing the school system with other folks representing other school systems. I don't remember seeing that statement. Maybe I just missed it, but if I haven't, I would hope that the superintendent, when she's making statements for the school system and consequently for this board, that we would at least have some information about what that statement says and why it's being said. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Golson. It just exactly what Phil said, that it's in the statement from the 31 Alliance Schools through CAPS, Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents. So I apologize if I will send it off to the board so you can see the entire statement from them. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to tell you that as we continue preparing for vaccinating our staff, we are going to use Friday as a half day instead of a full day, so that more staff members can go out to the designated sites to get their vaccination, so we can speed up what is going on. So Friday, we're proposing, I should say, Friday to be a half day to give staff time to go out to the various locations where they've signed up to get their vaccination.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Golson?
Thank you, Madam President. Since the superintendent brought up vaccinations, I want to just kind of add to that. I understand that citywide parent team has partnered with the governor's office and some other organizations to provide information to parents, particularly Black and Brown parents, regarding the myths surrounding vaccinations and trying to provide them with information they could be armed with when they're making their decisions. And I understand that the superintendent has not been as helpful to the citywide parent team to getting that information to the parents. In fact, they had a session over the last couple of days, I don't know which day it was, where they only had one attendee, which was sad. And part of that problem is because the information didn't get out to the parents over the parent link. And I hope that the superintendent will be more open to working with citywide to get that information out to the parents. Now, the response is going to be, I sent something out and I saw what was sent out. And it was one sentence that said, citywide providing information, go to their website. That was it. And that's not what the citywide president asked to be forwarded to the parents. So, you know, everyone is saying, including the CDC, that the more people that get vaccinated, the quicker we get out of this thing. I hope that that we will partner with the governor's office and some other nonprofits to get that information to our parents through our citywide and other resources. Thank you,
Madam President, may I respond? Because I don't like for misinformation to go out, lingering out there. That is totally untruthful. Mr. Diaz several times sent out messages, even put on site the locations and times for these meetings. You can look on site and see them. When he's sent to parent, I think some board members get that link also. He has been sending out. So that is not true and a misrepresentation of what's going on. Thank you.
Well, Madam President.
Thank you, Dr. Tracy. Mr. Golson?
Thank you. If that's untrue, then provide us with the information to show that, because I've gotten the parent link and I saw exactly. Can I finish, Dr. Tracy? I got the parents link. I saw exactly what was sent out. And I've also seen some of the emails and texts that have gone between you and the citywide president. And it's concerning to me that there's that kind of gulf between you and the citywide president. And Madam President, maybe you could serve as a kind of go-between to help those two resolve this issue so that our parents get the resources and information that they need. Thank you, Madam President.
Quite interesting.
Thank you.
Citywide Parent Team. Citywide Parent Team is an independent organization, had gone independent after Garth Harris left. It's an independent organization. Even with that, we have sent out all messages that have come to us. Danny Diaz is my designated person who has been sending out information, and he checks to see what information needs to go out. All information that came to Danny Diaz have been sent out. He is one of my trusted employees who is my messenger for the district. And I'll end it there. And there's, I have no, I am too, what should I say, experienced to be having feud with parents or anything like that. I don't have time for those things. I have the district to run and I have no time to be creating feuds here and there as some people are suggesting here. That to me is an insult, and I will not tolerate that insult from anybody, period.
Madam
It
Chair.
is not true.
Madam President?
Madam Chair.
Madam
point of
President,
order.
am I getting Madam President?
Dr. Joyner, state your point of order.
It seems that we're really diverting from the agenda.
Thank
I may be wrong.
Yes.
And it also seems that a problem like this can be resolved outside of the board meeting. These meetings are really to deal with the big business of the board.
Thank you.
And I now again, you'll have to
Point of
rule.
order, Madam President.
I haven't finished, Madam.
Hold on, Mr. Goldman.
You'll have to rule on that, but I just think that we need to really stick to the agenda items, and any problems that we have outside of that, we need to either put them on the next meeting or we need to try to resolve them off-site.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Your point of order is well taken, and we need to move on. And
Madam President, point of order, Madam
stay with the
President.
agenda.
Madam President, point of order.
What is your point of order, Mr. Goldman?
Madam President,
State the point of order, the rule.
I am, Madam President. The superintendent raised this issue as an addendum to her superintendent's report. I responded to that. She responded again with misinformation. So, and I suggested that you serve as a go-between to try to resolve this problem. She may think there's no problem, but the citywide president thinks there is. And I've seen emails that indicates that there is a problem. So if the superintendent is going to raise this issue, then she's going to have to, then we have a right to address that issue, Madam President. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item, the president's report. What I have is the fact that we need to start thinking about the evaluation for the superintendent, which is coming up. Contractually, we're obligated to complete that by June 30th. And so we can discuss dates at future meetings or at a later date or through email, but I just want you all to start just thinking about that so that we can start to begin the process of completing that before the end of the school year. Thank you. And with that, I will make a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Connecticut General Statutes 12006E and 1210B10 concerning confidential information contained in attorney-client privilege communications regarding Go-To Services LLC. And I would invite Attorney Alexiadis, Dr. Tracy, Mr. Penn. And you all should have received the link for the executive session in your emails. Mr. Bolton, you're muted. Is there a second to my motion to go into executive session? Dr. Joyner?
Second.
Any discussion?
Madam President,
Mr. Bolton?
I'm looking for the link, and could that be resent to me, please?
Me as well.
Dr.
Yeah,
White or Mr. Penn, could you resend the link?
I'll resend them now. They went out at about 5:20 p.m.
That's why I didn't see it. Okay, I'll look for it then.
Okay, any further discussion? So we'll vote on going into executive session. Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mr. Golton,
Yes,
Dr. Joyner.
Yes.
Is Dr. Jackson back?
yes, she is.
I
She
don't,
was a moment
I
ago.
don't see her. I don't see her on the.
I saw her.
I just saw her.
I did too.
Dr. White, do you see her in the waiting room or? I don't see her at all. In the meantime, we'll continue voting. Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Conway?
Yes.
Mr. Fiore's not in. Ms. Aruna?
Yes.
Mayor Elicker?
Yes.
And I am a yes. So we'll go into executive session. We have to leave here. Click on the link to go into executive session and we'll see you there. Are we all back?
Counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
We're missing Dr. Joyner. There he is.
Yep, there's Martha.
Eating, so I'm not going to show anything.
It's okay. I did that just a few minutes ago. All right, so we are out of executive session and back in regular session. There were no votes at the executive session. And so we move forward to finance and operations. Mr. Wilcox?
Thank you, Madam President. Before I present the move the action items, I'll just note, since there's a couple large action items here, one of which is the Head Start carryover funds abstract. And there's a lot of good things that are contained inside there that's going to be very helpful, including upgrading or building some outdoor classrooms and things for the use of Head Start, but that'll also be able to be used by the satellite. The Head Start facilities, the other parts of the schools will be able to use those. And the second large item is the last one, item 12, which is for $2 million, which is the math curriculum, which includes all the math textbooks. That went through Teaching and Learning Committee before coming to us, and will provide all the materials for mathematics for, I believe, the next 5 years. So just to note those large items for your enjoyment. I'm going to move now that we approve the 1 abstract and 12 agreements as presented as action items in the agenda.
Mr. Conway?
Second.
So properly seconded. Any discussion, Mr. Goldson?
Yeah, just one question. To the chairman of the committee, and perhaps through him to the superintendent. I see at least 4 items on here that are less than $20,000 and a few more that don't have any dollar changes to them. And I'm wondering, how do you make a decision which items don't come before us but are approved by the superintendent, and the ones that come before us? I don't know the difference. I don't know why we get a $17,000 item for approval, yet the superintendent is able to approve that without going through the board, and oftentimes does contracts that are higher than that. So how is that decision made? Thank you, Madam President.
I can certainly ask the superintendent moving forward to use her discretion on those and have some things as information only items. And some of it in the past, and I'll defer to her if she wants to speak to this, is sometimes it's a timing issue. I believe this was asked in the last finance and operations meeting, and sometimes it's a timing issue of when information comes, and she doesn't want to be a bottleneck for something that needs to get done through her review. So she puts it out there for the Finance and Operations Committee and that process. So if I'm incorrect, please correct me.
You're muted, Madam Dr. Tracy.
I said Matt is correct. Some of these items come late on Fridays or late before. What we usually would sometimes do is go over and look at them and get a sense of what these are for. If there's no time to actually go over them, we prefer to put it through finance operations where it can be discussed further. It's not really, and some of these are just amendments to things that have already gone through.
So I want to make sure I understand this. Though you have the authority to approve anything under $28,000,
that's correct.
You normally won't do that unless you don't have enough time to put it before the full board.
That's correct.
You don't want it to get stuck. Okay, thank you.
And just on the second question there regarding the things that have like a changing in the funding account, sometimes that is significant information because it's things that are moving into grant funding out of instead of general funds and things like that. And the total amounts of those are in some cases quite large. So even though the specific agreement amendment isn't changing the amounts, it does change the accounts, and it might change it from general funds to grant funds. And so I think that's also an awareness issue for the board and the public.
Mr. Wilcox. Any other discussion? Dr. Joyner.
I just want to make sure we're taking a math vote tonight because it's time sensitive.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes, it's item number 12. Agreement 12 is for the math curriculum and all the math materials.
Gotcha.
Mr. Golson.
One other problem, and thank you for pointing that out. Who's funding that? It doesn't have a funding source there. Am I looking at the right document? I don't believe that one or the one before it has a funding source.
There's a separate page. It's not appearing on the agenda, but it does appear in the board packet on the agenda items. So the funding sources for item number 12 is the Title I program, and the second one is the Alliance District academics.
I see. Okay, thank you.
And this was also through the, it's good work on the district's part to be able to find room for that in this year's funding rather than next year's funding. So I think that was also one of the things that was talked about as a significant plus.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Golson, Mr. Wilcox. Seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the F&O items. Mr. Wilcox.
Yes.
Dr. Joyner.
Yes.
Mr. Conway.
Yes.
Mr. Golson.
Yes.
Dr. Jackson.
Yes.
Yes. Is Ms. Aruna still on?
Did you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Elicker.
Yes.
And I am a yes, and so that motion carries. The Head Start report, Mr. Wilcox.
This will be extremely brief because our next meeting is on Thursday, March 18th, and so no report beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you. Governance report, Dr. Jackson. Uh-oh.
Hello? Yes.
You're not in a good spot, Dr. Jackson.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
We're voting, right?
No,
we voted already. Yes. No, it's your governance.
I said yes.
Yes.
No, your report.
Your governance report.
Okay. All right. Oh, yes, yes. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Give me a second. Let me go to the next one. I'll come back.
Okay. Teaching and learning report, Dr. Joyner.
Let me gather myself. Oh, okay. So I'd like to take this opportunity again to give a shout out to the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction, Paul White, Keisha Red Hannings, Tiffany Jackson, and all the others who are really helping to move the Teaching and Learning Committee along.
Okay.
And so,
hold on, Dr. Jackson. Hold on.
So,
oh, sorry.
And also Jessica Axel for taking such great minutes. We had a really robust meeting last time because we had so many stakeholders at the building level to talk about the math adoption. And it was a pretty thorough vetting of that. And we also had the vendors present to answer questions. And they've been very supportive. The other thing that I think is critically important is that our students are really concerned about global warming and the climate, both locally, statewide, nationally, and throughout the world. So they were going to present tonight, but I didn't want to keep them too long because I didn't know how long the meeting would last. So I'm going to ask the board to give them time at the next board meeting during teaching and learning. And the beauty of this is that one of the students is a graduate, and she's a freshman at Tufts University. And she still is working with the group, and the rest of them are underclassmen and seniors at our various schools. And I've helped them to develop a kind of phase-in process for trying to get the whole question of climate into our curriculum. And I told them that everything has a price tag. And thankfully, Dr. Tracy was in on it, in on the meeting. And we have to figure out ways to help them and how we can phase in the education that's necessary for people to take better care of the planet. I feel really good about those kids, and I'm looking forward to having them present to you next board meeting. And it's funny, it weighs in heavily on our discussion tonight about the air quality and water quality and environment in the schools. So hopefully we can embrace this whole notion of healthy buildings. That'll be one of the first shots across the bow to really start by improving the climate in our own community. The other thing is that what I want to bring up going forward is that I believe that we have to give a bit more attention to the social sciences and science. We spent a lot of this year on reading and math, and of course they are fundamental subjects. But those other two, scientific thinking clearly is a problem across the country, because all you have to do is look at what people are saying about the vaccination and some of the superstitions about science in general in this country. So we have to work a little harder, I think, in those areas. And in terms of social sciences, one of the things that Evie has been really a stickler for is this whole notion of racial equity. And I would argue it's social equity. She and I have had these conversations. It's not just about race, it's about orientation, it's about size, it's about everything. It's really about prejudice. And when you look at what's happening to Asian Americans and what has historically happened to Asian Americans and African Americans and Indigenous Americans, we know that we have miles to go before we sleep regarding trying to not just educate, but to get people to behave differently toward people that are different from themselves. So Dr. Tracy and even I've had a discussion about that, and we're going to try to drum up some interest in teaching and learning development to try to influence practice in the classroom in such a way that we're not just talking about stuff from a policy standpoint, but how is it that we can improve our practices across the curriculum? How can we use science to help people become more critically evaluative of conspiracy theories and unscientific information? And how can we help in the social sciences? How can we help our students understand the truth of what happened in this country's past with a resolution to make change? So we're going to be moving forward with that. And we're going to have to engage more students in the process. And the last thing I want to say is that I taught 2 classes last week at Career High School. I taught a class on the Black and Latinx studies. I want to give a shout out to the teacher, Gary Aurora, who is he graduated from law school, but he decided he wanted to be a teacher. And he's using what he learned in law school to be a phenomenally great history teacher. And I made a promise to those kids to reward them for their participation. I also got a firsthand experience of the difficulty of teaching remotely. And I'm going to put that information back into the system. Hopefully we can learn more and improve the quality of that. But we cannot combine Black and Latinx subjects because you cheat both of them. And we can't do that. You cannot do that. And so I really felt bad for the teacher, Mr. Conaway, because he was, and he has Black and Latinx kids in the classroom. And you can be Black and Latinx. I don't like Latinx, but if that's what people want to be called, that's what I'll call. I like Latino.
I don't like it either.
Well, yeah, and I don't like color, so I'm Black. You know what I'm saying? And so it's because African American, too many syllables. So I had a conversation with the kids, And there's a space where the history merges, and then there's some separate experiences that we need to talk about. But there's a common strand of colonialism, enslavement, and so on and so forth. And so we need to talk about that, because we have led this state. Mr. Golson will tell you that we were teaching Black History Hills in the late 60s. So we led this state in revisionist history, and we want to continue to give guidance to the state. And we'll be bringing that to the committee. And if anybody within the sound of my voice knows any of those kids in that class, tell them they did a great job and that there's more to come. And I have some nice surprises for them going forward. So thank you very much for this. If there's anybody interested in that subject other than me, let me know, and I'd be glad to incorporate you into our committee. I'm done.
Thank you, Dr. Joyner. Let's see if Dr. Jackson, is she, I don't see her anymore. Oh,
I'm
there
here.
you are.
Thank
Okay,
you for
governance
thank you for letting me
report, Dr. Jackson. Sure, no
Okay,
problem.
first and foremost, do any of the board members have any questions? I haven't gotten anything about the SRO document.
You did a great job with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have one more week to peruse that document, and they will join us on in our next meeting for a formal presentation and bringing their committee members. It's going to be a really nice presentation of the document. They worked really hard, and I thought it would be appropriate to allow the community to see the faces and hear the voices that brought that document to us. And at that time, we should be prepared to vote on that document. Okay.
Madam President?
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Mr. Golson?
I'm not done, but go ahead.
Just a quick question to you, Dr. Jackson, because you asked the question. I don't know if I received that document or not. Been on the road a lot, so I may have missed it. Can you forward it back to the board again one more time, or at least to me?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, okay. Next thing is, no, I think that's it for that. Oh, no, Madam President will be forwarding to the governance committee a policy around clean air. So we also will be working on that. And that's it for today.
The CAVE model policy for indoor air quality. Yep. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Dr. Joyner?
I'd like to take this time to congratulate Dr. Jackson on the way in which she dealt with a very difficult issue. I think that if people in the rest of the country followed that template, we'd probably have a better result regarding the interface of police with community. And the unsung hero in all of this is Dr. Carlos Torre, who worked very hard with us. But Dr. Miko Jackson has two brothers who are police officers, as some of you may know. And they're two of the finest young men I know. And I think that was tough for her. But I do believe that the recommendations that will come forward are fair, and that they do more to unite the various sectors of our police department with our students than divide them. And you will have to have lived in this city for a long time to understand why they're there in the first place. So thank you, Dr. Jackson, for that service.
Thank you for those kind words. And I really believe that when the community hears firsthand from Dr. Torre and his committee what their vision is behind the document, it's going to make a lot of sense and show that it wasn't just we're going to keep them in the school or that's our recommendation. It's a very robust and meaty document that leads us to, I think, the place where most of the community wants to wind up. So I don't want to, just completely tell all about it, but I really can't wait for them to present the document.
Sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. And facility naming report, Dr. Jackson.
We are finally moving with a meeting date, which is Wednesday, March, I think it's 24th. I like to meet around 7 o'clock so that, and we will establish the committee at that point and introduce the chairs and get the ball rolling with a timeline and stuff like that. So for the names that you're putting in, please make sure you give your names to Madam President so that she can forward them to the committee, and a email will be forthcoming for that.
Yeah, I have the names, most of the names I just need. Some of you didn't send me emails for some of your folks, but other than that, yeah, we're in decent shape. Sorry. Food Service Task Group, Mr. Conway.
Thank you, Madam President. We have a couple points that we've been making at the food service few. Obviously, we're always talking about students with life-threatening allergies, and we're trying to just stay on top of that. We're trying to monitor it through food services in the schools, because and we want to keep that life-threatening allergies issue on the table. At the last meeting, we had a presentation from a grant that the Urban Agricultural a team, a community team, and they have a master plan, and they're working with schools. That's Urban Agriculture, and we're going to talk about their master plan next week. The other thing that we've been struggling with is we've been trying to get some updates on some policies. So we're gonna get to those policies. Things just keep it takes a lot of work to work on policies, but we're working on those policies. And obviously we get updates on how food service is doing in-person, remote, and virtual learning. We're looking forward to bringing the students back on April 5th, and there's going to be more activity with food service. And it's a very important component of the school district. So and it's a good committee. It's one of those very powerful committees, but they're not seen as much. And finally, we will be having our next meeting on Wednesday, March 10th at 5 o'clock, and that's on the website, and also the minutes and the agendas are on the website as well. So I just want to thank the committee, Gail and Cheryl and Matt. Thank you for all the hard work that you do, and we'll see you on Wednesday. That's that committee. Do you want me to just go into the next one, my equity?
Absolutely.
Equity is equity committee. Again, we've been meeting. We've had 3 meetings right now. We're talking about we're looking at job descriptions. We're looking at information for surrounding committees. We're looking to get some recommendations to the board. It's a tight rope because this is not negotiations. This is some things that during negotiations probably went a different way than the pairs wanted it to go. But we will continue to work on that and have some recommendations and some proposals back to the board, hopefully before the end of the school year. So that's with the equity committee. And I just want to thank those individuals as well who are running that committee. It's difficult work, and with the economic state and the budget of the school system, the state and the city, it's when we're between a rock and a hard place. So we're gonna just keep on working and try to get some equity to those individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. For citywide school building committee report, don't have a report at this moment. Our next meeting is March 11th. And if there are no questions on that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
So second.
Mayor Elicker,
Yes.
Mr. Wilcox,
Yes.
Mr. Goldson,
Yes.
Dr. Joyner,
Yes.
Dr. Jackson,
Yes, yes.
Mr. Conaway,
Yes.
Ms. Aruna, she's not here anymore, right? And I am a yes. Good night, everyone. Thank you for a good meeting.
Adios.